All right, we will go ahead and kick it off. Again, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I can see in the chat that we have a wide range of places represented. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you might be. We really appreciate your time today to let myself, Shannon, as well as Pierce and Pavan from Regology walk you through our really great integration for regulatory change management. So before we get into a little bit of housekeeping, I just want to do a quick round of introductions so you all are familiar with who will be sharing this information with you today. I'll start with myself. My name is Shannon Long. I am an outbound product manager within the risk business unit. So I cover all of the risk products and work with partners like Pierce and Pavan from Regology to present great capabilities that we're releasing to customers and analysts and implementation partners or advisory partners. So super excited to be here today and excited to show you what we have coming. So I'll pass it over to Pierce.
Hello, I'm Pierce Gaynor. I'm the head of product at Regology and thrilled to be talking about Regology and the integration with ServiceNow today, as well as going through the demo for Regology.
Hi, I'm Pavan Bayepu. I'm the CTO of Regology. In that role, I am responsible for technology, engineering, and partner integrations.
All righty, so we will flip to the next slide. And just to level set, as you know, in the theme of talking about regulatory change, regulatory compliance, this webinar is governed by the Safe Harbor Notice. We will have some future and forward-looking statements, as this is a net new release coming out within our Utah family release. So just to stay compliant, these are all forward-looking statements, and we might even in our talk track give examples of what's to come. So please keep it confidential and no sharing or screenshots of the information. And for the next slide, this webinar is presented through our Live on ServiceNow group, and we have an exhausted list of schedules around different webinars and in-person meetups. And so if you'd like to see that schedule, the QR code is there for you to scan so you can make sure you're up to date on what the upcoming webinars are or if there's any potential meetups in your location. Moving to the next slide, we will have time at the end for Q&A, and we will have a couple polling questions. But again, feel free to use the Q&A button throughout the webinar, and we'll be able to answer it as we can. This presentation is recorded, and it will be available on the ServiceNow community. And after this webinar is done, if you wouldn't mind just filling out a short survey, we really appreciate any and all feedback. So let's jump right into the content. So to level set on the ServiceNow risk product portfolio in which regulatory change management sits in, when we work through our enhancements and the capabilities and what our customers need, we always lean on our vision for our product suite. And the vision we have across all the risk products is to seamlessly embed risk, compliance, resilience, continuity, sustainability, all of these great risk domains into the digital experience of the platform and the workflows that sit on the platform. And so, Pierce, if you don't mind bumping to the next slide, what this means is we have a slew of applications within the risk product portfolio, and today our focus will be regulatory change. And the reason we house regulatory change management within our product is because within integrated risk management, you're not only mitigating risk, but you're actively governing your organization and ensuring that you're adhering to compliance and regulations that have been set in place that you by law need to be in bounds with. But when those regulations change, it can be quite difficult to keep up and understand. And this is where our mission comes in. And we've partnered with Regology to create a great capability to seamlessly embed what those changes might be onto the platform through content integrations and notifications so that you're always aware in real time of any upcoming changes to the regulations that your organization is aiming to be compliant with. So all of our applications within the risk product portfolio sit on the ServiceNow platform. They're natively integrated, and we get to take advantage of some really cool capabilities like Integration Hub, like Flow Designer, and you'll see some of the workflows in regulatory change. But all these great capabilities and innovations has really aided in the growth of our product and the expansion of these awesome use cases like regulatory change. And so for the final slide, oh, I forgot I added this one. So just to level set on what this application does, what is regulatory change management? Ultimately, as I mentioned, we have a goal within integrated risk management to protect the enterprise from any potential threats, vulnerabilities, or impactful events, any risks that could lead to a harmful result. With the protection of those risks that we see through controls, a lot of those controls that we have at our organization are also aiming to be compliant with the long list of regulations and standards that have come out that all of us need to be compliant with. And as I mentioned, when those change or make updates, it's a full-time job to understand what the change was and how it really impacts our control library, but the broader organization. And so the regulatory change application works with content providers and partners like Regology to feed our platform with those new changes and those updates to authoritative sources. And it maps the internal data like your policies and like your controls. So you're able to see in one go, what's the change, what's it impacting, and then how much is it impacting my organization? And you can get that value of how much through the regulatory change impact assessment. And all of these capabilities and the data, of course, is then reported on in a consolidated manner. So that's just, the high level overview to get you familiar with the regulatory change management application. I believe I have one more slide and then we'll hand it over to Regology. So as I wrap up on the ServiceNow side, the reason we're here today is because working with Regology and our partners is a huge investment area for us. And so we hone in on that, accelerate the partner ecosystem as an investment area because it is so important. You guys are going to see really incredible content that Regology has been able to feed the platform with through an integration there. We, of course, always are wanting to be embedded, connected, and automated. And so you'll see a lot of that connection through the data mapping. We want to drive engagement and adoption, which again, you'll see through the workflow and the user experience that a regulatory change manager will have. You'll see that in the demo. And then last but not least, innovating on the platform. So providing automation like detection of duplicate alerts or consolidations of control, utilizing those capabilities to really make strides in innovation and make your life easier as you're working through the day-to-day tasks around regulatory change and regulatory compliance. So with that, I'll hand it over to Pierce to talk through the Regology side of the house.
Great, Shannon, thank you. I would love to start off with Regology's mission. And so the purpose of Regology is to really transform regulatory compliance through automation and empowering organizations worldwide to grow and innovate. So what that looks like, to Shannon's point, is enabling companies to have the latest legal content that applies to their organization, despite whatever jurisdictions that they're in. And so Regology helps companies streamline the process of classifying regulations, organizing them, and identifying impending changes, receiving relevant regulatory alerts and any enforcement actions, and then proactively scanning the horizon for legislation that could affect a current and future line of business. With regard to the primary scenarios for Regology and ServiceNow, the Regology Smart Law Library, which we'll dive into, helps companies track laws and regulations for each product and function. And Regology provides access to over 300 repositories of content with over 10 million authoritative documents. Then, because Regology's law library self-updates, we're able to provide relevant alerts and help track legislative and regulatory changes and agency updates. From an agency update standpoint, Regology provides access to over 1,000 agencies and their corresponding content. Moving into ServiceNow for impact assessments, the Regology ServiceNow integration enables being able to conduct impact assessments on these relevant legislative and regulatory changes. And then for the fourth step, being able to update controls and policies based on these impact assessments. To take a high-level overview of the integration for a second, so the content is mapped and stored within Regology, and when updates come through, they're pushed to ServiceNow. And then on ServiceNow, you can access the content accordingly, evaluate the impact of any changes, and then update any risks and controls accordingly. And with that, would love to actually dive into the demo and look at the Regology platform. So starting off with the law library on Regology, this is how to organize all of the authoritative documents that are applicable for a business into corresponding topics, and then being able to map the corresponding data. And so under these topics, let's say consumer protection, privacy, cybersecurity, you'll see the corresponding authoritative documents, the laws, regulations, bills, and other publications. And one of the benefits of Regology is actually being able to see the content or have the content mapped directly within the system, which is pushed into ServiceNow. And so what we're looking at here is a clause level mapping. And so despite the level, Regology is able to collect and then push the level of data required. And so right now we're looking at the clause level data, which can be pushed directly into ServiceNow. One of the benefits of being able to map at this most granular level is being able to see corresponding regulatory changes that are mapped directly to that level. And so if we were to look at some of the availabilities of what's possible within Regology, being able to see at that most granular level, what were the changes to that particular clause? What were the additions? What were the deletions? And what was tied to that particular document? And so before, when we were talking about the different alerts that were possible and regulatory changes, I did want to quickly highlight that through Regology, we're able to scan the horizon for any relevant bills based on what exists within the law library. You're also able to view any updates to any laws and regulations that are mapped, as well as any corresponding agency updates. And when we're looking at agency updates, do you just want to highlight being able to look at duplicate alerts as well, or being able to see the progression of different alerts? And so in this particular instance, we're seeing a proposed rule being pushed into a final rule and seeing these two alerts tied together. And one quick note from the agency update standpoint, did want to highlight again that Regology does provide content for over 1,000 agencies. And from a bill standpoint, from a horizon scanning standpoint, did also want to highlight one of the benefits of Regology is being able to see all of the steps in the legislative process, where a bill is, and what were all of the interim steps in between as well. And on that note, would like to hand it over to Shannon to look at this within ServiceNow and how the content alerts are displayed there.
All right. Thank you, Pierce. As I'm getting my screen sharing set up, I mean, I just have to say I love the track changes view. I think that is just so cool to be able to have that visibility into exactly what changed, what was added, what was deleted. It's really just a very transparent way to fully understand how these regulations are changing. So cool that that functionality exists on the Regology side. So first, are y'all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So we have transitioned over into a ServiceNow instance, and this instance does have the Regology intelligence feed available and turned on. And so we are feeding that great regulatory data into our ServiceNow platform. So I'm going to walk through a couple of the scenarios or capabilities that Pierce talked through. The first being just to take a quick review of when that data comes in, what it looks like, and how it is mapping to those citations, in which in turn map to your internal controls and policies. So I am looking at my list of assigned regulatory alerts. So I am acting as the regulatory change manager, and I'm going to be coordinating the tasks and the impact assessment around this alert, because we know when regulatory alerts come in, multiple people need to be aware, not just one person. So I will go ahead and click into a net new regulatory alert. And so you can see we have the workflow up top, which I'll talk about here in a little bit, but I really want to hone in on the data mapping. So you have great metadata around the provider URL as well as the regulatory body URL. We have a title and description, and this is where you can start to define the ownership around this alert. When we scroll down, the Regology feed is pulled in dates for us to be able to understand when this source publication date was rolled out. And furthermore, when we scroll all the way down to our related lists, if you're familiar with that ServiceNow term, we're able to see related documents. And so these related documents are those source references up to the greater authoritative source that Pierce spoke about. And so because this data is mapped, the feed is able to say, okay, this regulatory alert around national cyber threat assessments has just come in, and these are the impacted citations, or these are the components of the authoritative source that are being changed or that are being impacted. And when we turn over into the internal, how does that affect us internally? How does that affect our control library and our policies? The citations within ServiceNow and the architecture that's available, the citations can map directly to your control objectives. And so the citations are the proposed outline of activities coming from that authoritative source. Your internal controls are going to be your unique control language for your organization. The great power behind this data mapping is not only that all the data is pulled in so you can see just the scope of data being impacted, but you can report on both the citation level, your compliance to that specific citation, but furthermore, you can report on your overall compliance to the authoritative source. So this citation maps up into a greater authoritative document. And Pierce reviewed a lot of what those look like on the Regology side, but you can build, as you can see, our data is quite clean. We haven't started working just yet, but you can see you build a compliance score percentage on the authoritative source, on the citation, and then equally on your internal control and your internal policy. So you always have a realistic and real-time view into where you stand against these regulations. And that compliance score is built on or is building on the effectiveness of your internal controls. So how your controls are performing, how effective they are from a design and an operational perspective is building up that compliance score with hopes to get to that 100% compliance. So the next scenario I want to dive into is actually the work being done, the workflow. What do we do with this data? How do we act on it? So I'm going to click into a regulatory alert. And so all regulatory alerts that come in will sit in new. And you then, of course, assign ownership, a coordinator, to understand how are we going to behave, how are we going to act on this regulatory alert. And you have a few options out of the box. Of course, you can say it's applicable and start the tasks related to updating any of the controls. You can perform an impact assessment, which we're going to review here in a second, to really understand from the control owner or the department head how impactful this regulatory change will be to the organization or that component of the organization. If the regulatory alert is not applicable, you can mark it as not applicable. You can also defer the regulatory alert and take a look at it at a later date. So when we scroll down, again, all of the attributes still being pulled in from Regology, but this go around, we've completed our regulatory impact assessment. And so this is an out-of-the-box assessment, but of course can be configured. It does sit on the advanced risk assessment engine. So what that allows you to do is really flexible configuration, low code, no code around the questions that you're asking, and then the weighting and percentage to get your overall criticality score that suits your organization. So as you can see here, I sent this impact assessment as the regulatory change manager to the control owner or the entity owner or the individual in the organization who knows this space the best and will be impacted by this space. And so that individual, Fred, completed an impact assessment. He evaluated the legal, reputational, financial, and business impact, was able to see the weighting there. And so in turn, we have an overall inherent risk score or impact to our organization. And for this example, it came out to be quite critical. So we have some work to do to make sure that this critical impact is mitigated and our controls are updated accordingly. Once the impact assessment is completed, it then moves back to me as the regulatory change manager to understand what tasks need to be documented and performed to be able to make sure that this regulatory event and change has been adopted by the organization, controls have been updated, and we now remain in compliance. And so the regulatory change application allows for regulatory tasks, and there's a workflow associated to this regulatory change task as well. We won't walk through the whole thing today for sake of time, but ultimately the coordinator can document their proposed plan. We send it over to the owner of the entity or the department head or the control owner, and they put in their input, but also ultimately agree to the overall plan of updates that need to be done. The regulatory change manager can then approve that the two individuals or two teams are on the same page, and then we actually physically go in and make those changes. So I would say primarily the changes are going to be to the control language, but it might be addition of controls. It might be updates to the overall policy. It might be in addition to a policy. It might be a testing to the new controls that are being rolled out. Whatever it might be, this workflow stage is actually where those changes are made within the data on the ServiceNow platform. And when I say data, not the regulatory data, because that is firm, that's what we're complying to, but your internal controls and policies, and potentially even your risk register as well. So the last scenario I want to talk through is really great capabilities from Regology to actually detect, and Pierce talked about this as one of his last points within his demo, but the detection of duplicate alerts. We don't want to be handling all these different alerts if they're just doing the same thing. So Regology has really amazing innovation and capabilities around the sense of consolidating and alerting the regulatory change team in the organization when there is duplication. And therefore, we can handle the regulatory alert in one go and not have to weed through all the different alerts. So I'm going to go ahead and click in to a new regulatory alert. And we can see we have similar data, all of which can be evaluated. But what we need to really pay attention to, and I gave a little bit of a secret away, but what we really need to pay attention to is when there's a field that says duplicate alert. And so the duplicate alert that will be automatically provided to you, and that alert will be seen. And so this regulatory alert deemed not applicable because we already know the duplicate alert. And when we click into that, we can see the workflow stands, and we now can start performing our analysis on this regulatory alert based on this final rule and understanding that there were other alerts, but they've been grouped. So this was very quick and a lot of information all at once, but ultimately you're able to see how amazing it is to have the regulatory changes come in from Regology and have that data automatically mapped and then map to your internal controls. So everything is consolidated for you and you're able to do the work and analyze and understand what needs to be updated within your environment rather than fully understanding what changed, why did it change, how did it change. Regology provides all that insight for you. So really, really great capabilities and an awesome partnership to enhance our regulatory change application. So Pierce, I'll hand it over to you because I think we have a few more slides.
Great. Shannon, thanks so much.
Okay, so we can take some Q&A for a little bit of time. So looking at the Q&A, I see one question about self-study individual GRC module related sessions. Yes, there should be. And Aisha, feel free to keep us honest from a live at ServiceNow perspective. But ultimately, yes, we have so many sessions, and I know we have very specified risk management sessions as well. The second question, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, no problem. The second question I see Pavan is actually typing an answer to, but Pavan, if it's easier to come off mute, just let us know. The question being, we generally translate regulations into internal policies on an end-to-end basis. Can you show how ServiceNow policy writer is aided in his/her work? Pavan, I see you're typing. Is it easier for you to come off mute and answer live?
Sure, perfect. So the regulations laws are synchronized into ServiceNow into the ServiceNow citation object. So, for example, parts, chapters, sections, and clauses within the sections are synchronized into ServiceNow. Depending on your requirement, you can either link at a section level, a policy can be linked at a section level, or you can link the policy at an individual clause, which is inside the citation.
Awesome. All righty. And just to piggyback off of that, because I know in terms of policy and the language, just to level set to the ServiceNow platform is able to translate into 21 different languages. The last time I checked, it was 21. And so the regulatory alerts that come in and your internal controls and policies are no exception there. It's a platform capability where all data on the platform can be translated as needed for our global customers. Another question came in that states, there are lots of regulatory content providers. What's the difference between Regology and some of the others who can also provide regulatory content? I will answer from my perspective, but then Pierce or Pavan, if you want to chime in on just your biggest differentiators. But I think in the demo that Pierce gave, Regology provides so much content. I mean, the numbers are insane, but also real transparent, like that track change. You're able to see in real time and through the alert and through their inventory and library of content, what changed and why. Other regulatory content providers that I've worked with, of course, provide the content, but sometimes we miss what exactly changed. So that's my perspective as I've worked with Regology and we're enhancing the reg change, but Pierce and Pavan would love your insight on how you feel Regology is a differentiator in the market.
Great. To add,
Good.
oh, Pavan.
Good, yes.
Would love to add just the granularity of content that we displayed, being able to essentially show the changes for clauses or whatever level that you're looking to map at, and what that then enables across the board. And so by being able to, let's say, store these most relevant laws and regulations within Regology, you're actually able to get a more nuanced and accurate horizon scanning as well, and then able to pinpoint exactly what the corresponding change was to the law or regulation. And then additionally, did just want to highlight the duplicate alerts, or being able to actually track as a proposed rule becomes a final rule, or as an introduced bill passes and then becomes law. And so being able to see at the most granular level what changed or where something is in the legislative progression process is one of the big benefits of Regology and one of the differentiators.
Yep. Also, I would like to highlight one more key differentiator. So the regulatory change alerts that you receive are dependent on your library. not a standard. It's not for an industry or a cookie cutter that fits every customer, but instead it is fine-tuned to your needs. So we use a legislative progression, which is how the bills are linked to the or the laws are linked to the regulation, and other mechanisms to identify what incoming regulatory changes are relevant for you. So that unique approach would reduce the noise and give you the most relevant alerts.
Awesome. And while I have Pearson Pavan, one more question came in. How often are the changes fed into the platform?
It'll happen on a daily basis. So, I mean, it depends on the larger repos. They have an SLA of a week to 2 weeks, but the agency feeds are fed on a daily basis.
Amazing. Super cool. And then I'll take the last one. It's a follow-up on the question around the regulations shaping a policy. So the capabilities today and within the ServiceNow platform, the policy management application has a workflow around drafting, reviewing, and approving and publishing your internal policies. So currently there's no intelligence around automatically generating the actual policy. The data linkage there is, of course, to help shape your policy, but our goal with the policy management capability is to allow you to draft the policy that's unique to your organization. Okay, one more question. In English only, or if we get Japanese regulatory content, do we get it in Japanese or English? From the ServiceNow side, you can have both. You can configure the platform to show both languages, but I'll let Pearson Pavan answer from the Regology side within their library how translations are handled.
Great. And Regology supports both as well. And so you actually be able to get the English translation and the Japanese as well. And did want to kind of piggyback on that answer as well, just the question about worldwide content. Not sure if everyone saw it in the Q&A, but Regology does cover laws and regulations from over 60 countries and with agency updates from from 100 plus countries. And so we do offer the translations for both English and Japanese, and then for all the countries we support.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. Well, I don't see any more questions coming into the Q&A, so I think we can go ahead and switch over to our polling questions. All right, so the first one being, where are you today? Are you needing a regulatory change solution? Are you looking? Are you understanding it's a need, but not quite at the evaluation or selection process? Or is this not affecting your organization just yet? So we'll give a little bit of time to answer this question. We'll give about 15 more seconds, hit a minute. All righty, we got just around 55%. Very cool. So a good broad sweep of answers there. We'll move on to poll question number 2. Which is, if you are looking, how soon is the need? Or if you're knowing it's a need, but you're not ready to start the evaluation process, what does that timeline look like? And this ultimately for us is really just to understand how quickly We need to make sure the capabilities on the ServiceNow side are meeting the needs of our customers as we're planning our releases. And so this gives us great insight into how urgent the regulatory change capabilities and digital efficiencies need to be for our customers. All right. And so last but not least, within the regulations, looking at poll question 3, what's most important to you? What is most interested in terms of sector, vertical, industry for your organization? I'd say of our evaluation and of the market and the use of risk and compliance management tools, the compliance side of the house has just become so important. There are so many regulations. They seem to just keep coming and coming, no matter what domain you're in, privacy, cyber. As AI, ML becomes so prominent and important, that is becoming regulated. ESG as well. All righty, so looks like financial services, heavily regulated industry, for sure. So these capabilities and these feeds and automation can be quite beneficial. All right. Well, with that, thank you all so much for joining. We went a little quicker than the hour we had planned, but I hope this was informative and it gave you, real insight into the awesome content that Regology is providing and layered on our regulatory change management application. Pierce or Pavan, any parting words?
Yeah, thank you all for listening in. Did just want to highlight in summary. So Regology does offer a self-updating law library with relevant content, enabling you to essentially providing a hyper-focused regulatory change management solution with an easy integration with ServiceNow. And did just want to call out this link to contact us. Please visit regology.com/ServiceNow, or please feel free to email me at pierce@regology.com.
Very good. And I should piggyback off Pierce. If you need anything from a ServiceNow risk products perspective, my email is shannon.long@servicenow.com. Always happy to discuss capabilities and roadmap, but super excited with Reg Change to discuss that and the great content that Regology has provided. So thank you all so much. Please remember to take the brief survey after this webinar concludes, and we look forward to speaking with you all again. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.